Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video I'm going to be talking a bit about Mythic Plus, some downsides to it, frankly. This mostly affects the middle of the pack, and I guess like the lower end of the pack, and not so much the high end. I think the very, very highest end Mythic Plus is in a fine place, because it's mostly dedicated groups and guilds and communities coming together to run really high keys, push them, teams even, MDI, and all that kind of stuff. So I think the high end's kind of fine, but we're going to talk about everything else. I'm going to offer up a few suggestions on what I think could happen to make it a little bit better. And I don't have, the solution necessarily, but just offering up some of my suggestions. And I do think I know the problem. I just don't necessarily know the coverall solution to the problem, if there is one. So it would behoove me to let you know like the impetus of this video, which is I was in a Pug Mythic Plus. I normally do it with my guild when I do them. People were busy. I wasn't going to be on for a long time. I thought, I hadn't done a high key at all for the other side yet. I just haven't. I've done like 3 or 4 Spires of Ascension just because people had those keys that I run with, but I haven't done a high other side yet. So I was like, well, I'll just try to improve my score. I've only done a +3 on other side, essentially. So, a bunch of +10, 11, 12s, and then a +3 on the other side. So I was like, well, I'll just try to raise my score up a little bit. I'll just look for like a middling key for the other side and try to, 2-3 chest it, whatever. Just raise my score up, 40, 50 points, whatever, on Raider IO, or however many points it would be to do that. And so I was like, okay. So I found I believe it was 9, +9 other side, and I joined it. Everyone had a decent enough score, and one of my suggestions, it wouldn't have affected this group specifically. Everyone had done like at least +7s, I believe, in this group, according to IO, and so I figured +9, would be easy. Probably, like I said, maybe at least 2 plus to it. Get into the group, and the DPS was actually really good overall. My DPS is high, but there was a hunter that could at least keep up with me on the trash. It was a little bit lower on the boss, but good trash damage. And then the mage was just kind of like an average player. Nothing wrong with that. Tank, average, which is fine. But it was a bit evident from this onset that the healer was probably not going to be able to keep up, unfortunately. I didn't say anything. I try not to be toxic. I try to be, and I'm trying to be even less toxic it's something I constantly work on, frankly. So I didn't say anything at first, even though I had some doubts. So we're on the other side. We kill Hakar first, then we head over to the Mana Storms, and that's where issues really got out of hand. So it turns out that the healer, and I won't use his name or anything like that because I'm not trying to humiliate anybody, but it turns out the healer could not get past the slimes. So if you don't know, on the other side, you have to go past like a frogger type thing. That's what everyone calls it. You have to go past these slimes that go by. If you touch one, you die. And it's pretty easy to do. Some people like Warlock Gate over it or whatever. Well, he died to those 5 or 6 times. One time, we were fighting the next pack of trash already because the tank just assumed everyone would get through, I'm sure. And so after, I think it was the 3rd time, I'm like, hey, or it was after the 2nd time, I said, hey, if you die again, let me res you so you don't keep on the other side of this, so you don't keep dying. So I res him, and you could probably guess what happened next. He died immediately on like the thing that shoots out the oil on the walkway, just plummets to his death. He dies 2 more times to the slimes and 2 more times to the oil before he finally gets through. And I kid you not, we still actually, if the last boss would have went correctly, we still actually would have timed the key despite that, because the rest of the group was fine. There was 2 good DPS, 1 average DPS, an average tank. It's only a +9, and we still would have timed the key actually. So I knew that was going to be bad. We barely killed the Mana Storms as it was. The mage ended up ice blocking with his mirror images out to finish off the boss. It was almost dead, and because the healer just couldn't keep up with anything. It was very unfortunate. So then, anyways, we get to the last boss. The healer can't do it at all. Our average DPS, maybe he wasn't doing his cooldowns correctly or whatever, but he couldn't hold up his end of the bargain on that either. The group just kind of fell apart. I was only in it to raise my score. I gave it plenty of wipes and before I left, but I just ended up bailing on it. It was very unfortunate, but it is what it is. So that's the, I know that's a long story, I guess, but that's what got me thinking about making this video. So the issue is, how do you avoid something like this? How do you avoid that? Well, there's multiple ways that I can think of, but none of them are perfect. And so maybe other people can have better ideas. If you have better ideas, I suggest that you either tweet, go to the forums, whatever. Try to get in touch with the Warcraft devs and everything to offer these solutions if you have a actual good solution. The first thing I thought of was not being able to do a key level unless you've done within +3 of that. The reason I say that is because you can technically upgrade your key +3, and you also don't want to overburden the high end people. So like on a new season, you don't want them stuck not being able to do something. You want them right at the beginning, so they get their plus whatever, they do it. Or like if the key carries over, I can't remember season to season if it carries over. I don't believe it does, but if a key carries over, so if you get like a 15 or whatever, +15, let's say, at the start of the season, and you do it, like you can do your own key that you get out of the chest no matter what. But let's say you do a +3, you time it, then you can do up to a +6. If you complete the +6 on time, then you can do up to a +9. If you complete the +9 on time, you can do up to a +12. Onward and upward, right? And then, or you could just make it to, once you do a +10, you could do any level. Again, I don't have the perfect solution to this. And like I said, this wouldn't have affected my run at all. That priest had multiple, the healer, I shouldn't have said priest, but that healer had multiple like +7s done. So even in that system that I was talking about, he would be able to do like a +10. So the 9 shouldn't have been an issue for him. The other thing is, I don't know if he'd ever done the other side. Again, it wasn't my key. I was just joining a group. I don't know if he'd ever. I say that meaning I didn't like inspect everybody's like score and see exactly what everyone had done. So I don't know if he had done a other side before, because based on it, I don't know if he'd ever done the dungeon before. And if he had, he was maybe just on like regular Mythic or such a low Mythic plus that he was able to be carried completely. Like didn't really need a healer. So that could have been the issue. Maybe he normally was a damage and didn't actually normally heal. Maybe that was the issue. I'm not sure on that either. So all kinds of issues there. But so technically, even with my strategy, he still would have been able to do that, unfortunately. So you could make it to where you have to do a certain dungeon. Again, I don't want to hinder the top end people. It's fine for them. They're in a group. They're doing it together. Slightly less toxic, and I don't want to hinder them by having these rules that they don't really need, right? When you have a dedicated 5-man group, you don't need these rules and restrictions, and frankly, they only hurt you and hurt your playing experience. So I don't want to hurt them. That's my second most priority. My first priority is to make it a better experience for everybody. My second most priority would be to not hurt the high end people by imposing restrictions that hurt them. So the other thing, so I don't think you could really do, you have to complete a certain dungeon at a level to do the higher of that specific dungeon. So again, it's not a perfect solution. That's just one solution. Maybe someone can make that one better. Another thing I thought of was just having like a score system, like a rating system, I guess you'd say. And this would be more like if you play Overwatch at all, how you can like give people props or whatever after a match, or I think you can give like negative things to them. It's kind of like that, only this would be like publicly seen. So if this healer joined a bunch of groups, and again, I'm not using this person's name because I'm not just picking on them, this is just my example. If this healer has a lot of these experiences and so they're constantly being voted, you'd have very general things like exceeds content level, can't perform at this content level, just very general things like that, or has a very good attitude or has a very bad attitude, right? And so you could put that for this healer, for example, you could put just cannot perform at this level of content, cannot do this dungeon or whatever. And if they keep getting those group after group, then they're not going to get invited. And frankly, they shouldn't be invited. That healer should not have come to that key and ruined it for everybody else, the other four people, and wasted their time. That that's what we want to avoid here. We're looking for efficiency, and so there's huge issues with this as well because there's tons of trolling in all gaming, in all internet, and especially in World of Warcraft. Although not the most compared to some other games, but tons of trolling. So you could, let's say, I know I've been kicked out of a random heroic group. Sometimes I do random heroics. Maybe just because it has the extra cash award, like if you queue as a tank or healer or something, or sometimes I just do it just for a quick background video for one of my videos for YouTube, and I've actually been kicked out. I actually started doing them on alts when I do that because I actually get kicked from groups for having a lot of gear and doing damage. Tanks will kick me because I'm pulling threat off them. And DPS will kick me because they're like, I don't get to do damage because you're in here. And so I actually get kicked from groups for having too much gear sometimes when I do casual content. And that's I would consider that a bit of trolling, right? Because now I get the Dungeon Deserter buff. I can't do what I was doing. And that's actually how the starting doing it on alts happened, was I had to log off, and I just logged off and did it on alt I could tank and went from there. And now that's kind of what I do. If you ever see me on like a bear druid, in a video, and it's in a dungeon, I'm probably doing like a random heroic, probably with a extra reward thing, and it's because I can't do it on my main because it just happens so often where I get kicked from a group. I don't say anything in chat. I don't say anything negative. I'm not being toxic, but people just get mad at it for whatever reason, and there's just a ton of that, and it goes on both ends. It's not just, and it would be high end people trolling low end people too, and so that's the negative thing about a rating system. And they've thought about doing that before in the game, and I believe that was the reason given, is because you can't always trust those things, and they don't want a person to be blacklisted that doesn't deserve it. Like, I don't want to be, if I'm doing low keys to raise my score, like the good old fashioned way, and like building up my keys and stuff, I don't want people to report me as like toxic because I had more gear than them or something like that. That would be what would happen in my case, because I don't really say much in the chat or anything. So in my case, it would be being reported toxic for being over geared for the content maybe. So that's I certainly don't want to be blacklisted for that. So that's a huge folly in that thought process as well. The other thing is to actually have a rating like a Raider.io in game through Blizzard UI. Now, you wouldn't do it the exact same way. You would want to do it more generally based. So because the Raider.io, highly prioritizes high end players, right? The way it works, because you get more score on how fast you go. Now, what you would want is maybe a rating system if it was in the game. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad system. I'm not saying it's bad to go fast. It's good. Again, I'm talking about efficiency, so going fast is good. But maybe the rating in game would be completed keys. You complete this at this level, you get this many points for it, or it affects your rating in this way. You'd want to see completion of keys more than the timing of them, and then you would also then just have a percentage of timed maybe. So you would have completion percentage, timing percentage, and that would somehow factor into a rating, and that would give you enough information. Because if someone has like a 95 completion percentage, then that person's probably pretty safe to bring because they're not going to leave the group. That means that groups around them haven't disbanded because of them, like because of that healer that I left the group eventually, because after 45 minutes in a +9 and like 10 wipes on the last boss, that's just what happens, is you just leave. But so you would want to see a high completion percentage, probably over 90% if possible, and then you would want to see as high as possible timed percentage. Obviously that's not an issue for some people. Some people just want to complete their key, so the time percentage wouldn't even matter to them. People who want to push a key, all of a sudden the timing percentage might even carry more weight than the completion percentage, because they understand, well, if they just want to time their keys. If they don't time them, they leave. So we'll just time it and they won't leave. So that could be a way to do it as well. And now that I'm talking through this with those three options, this one actually seems like the best option. I don't think Blizzard will do it, put an in-game rating system in, but I think this is actually a pretty good idea now that I'm talking through it. So again, completion percentage, timing percentage, and give that sort of information so players can form groups accordingly around that. And I think that would actually be a pretty good solution out of all the three. Again, not that any of them are perfect. But yeah, so this is my diatribe, my thoughts on Mythic Plus right now. Very thankful I'm in a guild, and that I have people that will do Mythic Plus with me, because if I had to do Pugs all the time, I just wouldn't do Mythic Plus content because of these issues, and it being too difficult to find a proper group for all different classes and specs and stuff like that. And you could just tank or heal, and then you can find a group real easy. But sometimes people just want to DPS, and a lot of times that's me. Although I don't mind tanking dungeons, it's just not my preferred thing to do. So that's it for this video. As always, I do ask you to subscribe to the channel because it helps me out so much. And other than that, everybody, have a good one.